Hi, Tefano, Markie here. If you are new to this channel, let me introduce myself. So I am Mark Lindsay Early. I am a psychotherapist by profession, and I am the proprietor of Retroactive.com, which is an international therapy practice which specialises in helping people recover from retroactive jealousy. So I'm a retroactive jealousy sufferer myself. I've got lots of experience in lots of other areas of therapy, including addiction, lots of work around relationships and gender. So I've worked a lot with people who are trans, also sexual abuse and sexual harm. So I've got quite a wide range of areas that I work in. Retroactive jealousy is probably the main thrust of the private work that I do. And one of the things I like to do is to spread awareness about retroactive jealousy through these videos. Now this channel, as you may have noticed, isn't called Retroactive Jealousy, and it isn't called Retract.com. It's called Mark the Demystifier, because this is a broad channel that covers all kinds of different areas. Some of the areas we cover on this channel are to do with related to therapy or psychology, and some of them are related to something completely different. So overall, the theme of this channel is about bringing understanding in areas that are very confused, or there's lots of misinformation or misunderstanding. So that's the thrust of the channel. So some of the videos that you'll find on this channel are specific to retroactive jealousy. Unfortunately, you'll have to dig around for them because I can't find a way of actually just listing them. I'd like to put them all in one section so you can just easily find them. But if you dig around, there's quite a number of videos about retroactive jealousy. This being one. I also have a Patreon channel, and if you're interested in that, that's fantastic. Details in the information box below. On the Patreon channel are some additional exclusive retroactive jealousy videos. So again, the Patreon channel mirrors this YouTube channel, but there's also some exclusive content on there. So there are a number of videos on there about retroactive jealousy that aren't available for free. Most of the videos that I do on retroactive jealousy are for free, and put them out there. And please share this with anyone that you think that might be benefit or potentially benefit. So, having set the context, the topic for today that I want to talk about is other conditions that co-occur with retroactive jealousy, or can co-occur with retroactive jealousy, and which can make it more complicated or more difficult to treat, or exacerbate the symptoms. And there are two specific areas that I want to talk about. I want to talk about ADHD, and I want to talk about the autistic spectrum. Now, if you want to know sort of more generally about ADHD and the autistic spectrum, there's other videos in my series that you can watch which aren't part of the retroactive jealousy series. So I've done one very recently which is about ADHD, autistic spectrum and sex, which if you have either of those conditions, I would strongly recommend watching that video. And I also have another video series called neurodiversity, which talks about, sets the context for conditions like ADHD, autistic spectrum, dyspraxia, dyslexia, dyscalculia, dysgraphia. I probably missed one out, but there's lists all those conditions, which and goes into some depth about how they often overlap or co-occur, stuff like that. So that'll give you some more general information on that side of it. But today, the focus is going to be very precise and narrow on retroactive jealousy when it co-occurs with autism and or ADHD, and often the two go together, so it can be both. And I'm hoping this will be quite a brief video, but usually when I say that, they go into 10 parts, so we're going to try and keep this one short and snappy. It's a big subject, could say a lot more about it, but I'm going to keep this really down to the bare bones. So what I recommend for people with retroactive jealousy, if you have any suspicion whatsoever that you might also be suffering from these conditions, and they're not as obvious as people think they are, there's a huge number of people on the autistic spectrum that are not diagnosed. They've got no idea they're on the autistic spectrum. Likewise with ADHD, it's not what people think it is. There's lots of myths about it. So if you think there's a possibility that you might have these conditions, then I would suggest look into it. And there are questionnaires that you can do. They don't give you a diagnosis, but they're what we call screening questionnaires. So they give you enough information to tell you whether to pursue this further medically. So for example, you fill in a questionnaire and it will come out if you score above X, then there's a possibility that you have this condition, therefore seek specialist guidance. And if you score very low, it's less likely that you have this condition. What I would recommend is, if you do that though, is do probably try and find 2 or 3 different questionnaires, because some of them I find, particularly the ones for autism spectrum stuff and Asperger's would be part of that, are not very good. I'm quite critical of those questionnaires, but we won't get into that now. It's another subject for another video. So let's get into the meat of the subject. If you have ADHD, one of the issues with ADHD is a reduced number or reduced functioning of dopamine receptors, which basically means that generally you feel flat, bored, and shit. Okay, you could dress it up more nicely than that, but that's the long and the short of it. So people with ADHD are constantly searching for something to fire up their brains and fire up their dopamine. Now this is really interesting, is that feeling angry, upset, jealous, distressed, distraught is actually perceived as better than just feeling flat and bored. Okay, so in other words, what we might call negative emotions, I don't really like that term, but for purposes of convenience, we'll say the negative emotions, when they are aroused in someone with ADHD, they actually trigger a greater production of dopamine and actually make people feel a bit better on some level. Okay, so this is kind of sounds counterintuitive. So to put this in a very kind of simple context, is somebody with ADHD will, when everything is going smoothly and well, and and life for a short while becomes a picnic, they will do something to spoil it. They will stick a spanner in the works. Okay, so people with ADHD will start arguments for no good reason, other than their dopamine is low and they're feeling really flat, and they need some kind of stimulation to get their brain working, and that stimulation can be positive or it can be negative. So what has this got to do with retroactive jealousy? Okay, one of the key things in retroactive jealousy, and this fits with what we call the golden rule of not asking your partner questions or not seeking more information about their sexual or romantic past. That is sometimes referred to as bear poking. Okay, so you get the image, there's a bear, and maybe the bear's asleep, or the bear's kind of fairly passive, he's kind of fairly mellow, but you kind of see the bear and you kind of poke and prod to get a reaction, and then the bear kind of bites your head off. Okay, so there's no sound reason to poke the bear in the first place, but people with retroactive jealousy and people with attention deficit disorder have a compulsion to poke the bear. Okay, so if you have retroactive jealousy and you don't have attention deficit hyperactivity disorder or attention deficit disorder, then there is still a tendency to poke the bear. If you have ADHD or ADD, then you'll have an even stronger compulsion to poke the bear. Okay, you will actually deliberately trigger your RJ responses to increase your dopamine flow, and even though you will feel terrible, it's better than this flat, empty, bored feeling that you get through lack of dopamine. Okay, so this is a really useful piece of information. Okay, so if you know you've got ADHD or ADD, this is something you can work with, and if you suspect that you might have it, then I would earnestly and strongly encourage you to find out. Okay, because that will make your recovery more difficult, because you'll have twice the inclination to poke the bear, twice the inclination to ask questions, twice the inclination to disturb your own equilibrium by thinking unhelpful and triggering thoughts. Okay, so that's part one. Part two, autism spectrum conditions, which include Asperger's, include pathological demand avoidance syndrome. I've got another video on that if you want to look into that. One of the main common symptoms of autistic spectrum conditions is a tendency to fixate upon things. Okay, to really blinker, zone in on a particular thing, and to have very black and white thinking. And sometimes It can involve kind of a difficulty with grasping kind of some nuances. So sometimes very literal minded sometimes. So sometimes, you know, somebody that's on the autistic spectrum, whether it's either the high end or the low end, will have difficulty grasping some of the human complexities, and will. So how can I put this in more plain speech? They will tend to have there's a tendency to have a slightly more simplistic way of looking at things, and a more black and white way of looking at things, and that can be a more judgmental way of looking at things. So somebody on the autistic spectrum is more likely to get rigid ideas of right and wrong in their heads about things like sex and sexual behaviours. So it's very easy to kind of get some quite odd ideas around sex, and this is where it'd be really good to watch that other video about, which is just talking about ADHD and autism spectrum and sex. So, okay, so what's the other key symptom with retroactive jealousy? Rumination, thinking the same thoughts over and over again, obsessing, dwelling on one thing. Okay, so, and that's also a symptom of being on the autistic spectrum. So if you're on the autistic spectrum and you've got RJ, double whammy. Okay, so if you're on the autistic spectrum and you've got ADHD or ADD and you've got retroactive jealousy, there's a lot going on. So if you just do a program to address the the speech difficulties and the retroactive jealousy, then you may find that it's not very effective. You may find that you don't get as much benefit as you might if you're also able to address the issues around ADHD and autistic spectrum, because there are techniques and skills and awarenesses and even kind of, you know, foods and supplements that can help manage some of the symptoms of the ADHD and the autistic spectrum condition. You know, simple things around diet, simple things around sleep, lifestyle, and on psychological techniques as well. So this is something we could talk much more about. It's the sort of thing that, you know, we could talk to you on a one-to-one about, if that would be helpful. But I hope that's helpful to you. So you might find that you suffer from retroactive jealousy. You've done the standard kind of recovery stuff from that. You've maybe done Zachary Stockel's program, which is brilliant, and it's still not hit the spot. It might be that something else is lurking beyond the retroactive jealousy. And of course, there can be loads of other things as well. That's why the retract.com practice that we run is so effective, because we're all qualified psychotherapists, so that we can work with RJ. We've got a very good understanding of that, but we can also go deeper into the underlying stuff, and we can work with trauma, and we can work with all kinds of things. So I have said quite enough already for a short video. I hope that's helpful. If you have any questions, you can use the comments, or you can get in touch, or if you want to book a one-to-one session, please do. If you think this video might help anyone, please share. And down below is a link to our website, and down below is a link to some of the other videos that I've mentioned, as well as other hopefully useful information. I will say farewell and Rangimarie. Goodbye.